Hey everybody, Spencer Sutton here with Evernest, and I'm with our Detroit team leader, Jacob West. Glad you're here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Jacob's in town. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. He's also here for the time being. We had a meeting this week, and so I thought I would grab Jacob and talk to him about, because he lives in Detroit. He and his wife live in Detroit. He runs our whole Detroit operation up there, and we've been getting a lot of questions from homeowners who are considering, should I sell or should I rent my home? And they're really kind of thinking about this. Maybe they own their home and they have a 3% mortgage. They don't want to give that up, and they're thinking, or maybe they're moving out of town and potentially could come back to Detroit. So I just wanted to ask you, based on your experience, you've been doing this a long time in the operations, you've talked to hundreds upon hundreds of homeowners and investors and all of these things. If somebody is considering renting versus selling, like, what are the top 3 things that they should be thinking about as they're making this decision?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the big one is you need to understand what's your strategy. What are your needs? What are you looking to get out of this transaction, whether it's a rental or a sale? Mm-hmm. In some cases, let's say someone owns a house outright, and they have no mortgage. They don't need to cash out on that property to fund their next down payment. Maybe they're moving somewhere temporarily and they're going to rent. Mm-hmm. Whatever the case may be. In that case, it's pretty easy to make cash flows on a rental if you own it outright. I mean, it's pretty hard not to, honestly.
Right.
But is it going to make, is that all you want? Do you just want to not lose money and hold on to the investment? Do you have a certain number that you want to get out of that investment? Right. Because, let's say you have a house that's worth $250,000. You can make that money work for you in a lot of ways.
Right. Sure.
Not just having a rental property. So, there's 1,000 things that can go into that calculation. Even if you have a mortgage, you can still cash flow on the property, or it might make sense to take a small loss on it even if you're going to be out of town for, let's say, just a year, and you really plan on being back. You love the house. You want to be in that area.
Right.
People do that all the time too. So there's not necessarily like a magical formula that says, oh yeah, renting is a better decision here than buying, because even if you can say, oh, this house would be a really good candidate for a rental, or this market is really good, I would make a ton of money by selling it. Your goals matter, and that, to be honest, they matter more than anything else. That's the most important thing. Is will your decision help you get to your financial goals? And it can even be life stages too. If you're about to retire, do you want to worry about the potential uncertainty of a rental, or do you just want to cash out and put that into, something really safe like T-bills or something, and just have it that way?
I've seen people like move out of their house, rent it, and then leave it as a gift for kids. I've seen all kinds of things like that. Just, again, based on what their goals are.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So that's a big one.
Okay, that's number 1. I think that's the first consideration. Okay.
Yeah, so second thing is you need to understand, we did just talk about cash flows and your goals. If you have certain goals in mind with cash flow and everything, cash flow, maybe value appreciation, no matter what your goals are, it's very important to understand the cash flow side of it for rental, because that is it's the biggest consideration as to why you'd rent it out. It's like when you're investing in the stock market, you need to look at, you need to believe that a certain stock is going to achieve a certain return over the long haul. You need to do the same with a rental property. So understanding, how do you calculate cash flows on a rental property? How do you calculate expenses on a rental property? Right. And what do you want there? So
let's talk about, because this is something I didn't do when I first bought my first rental. I was not calculating, okay, what are all the expenses that are going to come in there? I just had to learn them, right? And so there were things, obviously, like maintenance. There were things like, for me, it was non-homestead taxes were increased. I had different insurance on the property. And then just all these different repairs that I thought, well, I don't repair my house that way. Why does a resident want that? So talk about some of these things.
Yeah, so those are all what I would call the inputs to your cash flow model. So step 2 is making sure you know how to calculate cash flow. You need to know what your inputs are going to be. Do I have a mortgage? Do I not? Are you looking for a certain cap rate, or are you looking for a certain monthly return? There are a bunch of different ways you can do that. It's different for everybody.
One thing I will mention right here is we do have a cash flow calculator on our website.
Yeah.
You can download that. It's free. Download that, and you can have those inputs there.
Yeah, and it may depend on your goals which one you'd like to use. Are you someone who needs the income, in which case you need to use the cash flow. You need to look at what's my cash flow going to be on a month-to-month basis. But if you're viewing this more as, should I rent the house or should I take that money and invest it elsewhere, then you need to be looking at return rates. So, my favorite to use is cap rate. That's just me, but there are 1,000 different ways, right?
Right.
So, selecting your method and understanding it is step 2. And then the third thing you need to consider would be, what exactly are those inputs going to turn out to be, which is the things you're talking about. So, how much is that non-owner occupied tax going to run you? How much will repairs run? How much can you rent it for, and what does the growth outlook look like for that rental rate?
Right.
So there's those things are, to me, like the final layer is determining what are those inputs going to be now that I have my model selected. So I know we were going to talk about, or you want to talk about kind of how to predict maintenance expenses.
Yeah, I think that's probably the one that people think about a lot, is like, well,
it's often the biggest.
Yeah, it's often the biggest maintenance, because you have, not only do you have just like normal maintenance, but then you have like bigger CapEx expenditures. And so let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I would say that our kind of favorite rule of thumb is 1% to 2%. You hear people throw that around a lot. And what that means, to expand on it, is because it is, people literally will just say, oh, 1% to 2%.
Yeah,
like that explains everything.
Right.
But what 1% to 2% means is that your property maintenance expense generally should fall between 1% and 2% of the total rent collected, either per month or per year. So you can break it out per month if you want to, or you can take annual rents. It doesn't really matter. But that 1% to 2% it should be basically your long run average. So this is not, I'm going to spend only this much every year.
Gotcha.
This is, if I hold this thing for 5 to 10 years or more, this is what my expense ratio should be on maintenance. So, for example, if you have a house that rents for $1,000, it is pretty unlikely that you're going to meet your 1% goal if you have to replace an air conditioner.
Yeah.
Some years you may not hit your 1%, and some years you might have way less. There are plenty of properties where maybe they've undergone a recent renovation, maybe they're newer build, and in those cases, you can see month or yearly maintenance expenses, like sub $500,
Sure.
Which means you absolutely crushed your goal.
That's right.
So it's definitely important to think that this is not, like, these predictive tools are assuming a hold. Like you can't necessarily perfectly predict things in too short of a time frame.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really, really good, because, and so you do need to consider the age of your house.
Yes. The size
of your house.
Which is actually another way to think about the 1% to 2% rule.
That's right.
Which I kind of like to get both and then blend them.
Okay.
So 1% to 2% of rents. Or 1% to 2% of square footage.
Gotcha.
So 1% to 2%
per month.
Yeah, per month. So if you have a house that's 1,000 square feet, then $100 a month is $100 to $200 a month is not a bad estimation. So if that house for 1,000 square feet rents for $5,000, you can see how there'd be a huge mismatch there in the rules. So this kind of, like, if you take both and the age of the house, when major systems were replaced, etc.
Right.
And you know what it'll rent for, then you can determine where in that spectrum you need to be, because you can have really, really expensive rent houses that are very small, or apartments, especially condos are very much in this category.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Or you can have the other way around. You've got a house that's 100 years old, it's 1,600 square feet, and it's in a cheaper area, it may not rent for as much. So definitely important to consider both of those.
Yes.
And then kind of, you can use your own knowledge of the house to blend that, your knowledge of the market and where rents are going. And of course, this is something we'd love to help with as well.
Yeah, right.
Or even using, other people in your network, hey, I know you've had a rental property for 10 years, how'd it turn out? Or let's say you're doing some work on the property and everybody has a few vendors they may have used before.
Yeah.
Ask your HVAC vendor, when you have your tune-up, hey, how much longer do I have on this thing?
What's my life
what
on
is
this?
this? Is this look pretty good for 5 years, or is it in rough shape? Is there anything I can do better to reduce my maintenance? And those guys they'll have an idea there. So
I think this is really very important, as I've mentioned before, and I was just sitting here thinking, like, if I went to rent my home right now, my wife and I have lived in our house for 20 years. We take care of the house, so we fix things, but I'm not like fixing everything that my wife wants. And so I think this is something you should also consider is you want to present a product, a rent-ready product, and that probably looks different to you who are living in the home than it does to a resident who's going to move in the home to rent it. And so having someone like an expert in the market, maybe even walk through your property just to say it's rent ready or no, it's not rent ready is pretty important, because you want to even consider those numbers into your return.
Like certainly.
How you're doing this.
If you had to do, let's say a pretty heavy renovation on a place, which is not that uncommon even for owner-occupied houses, even if you take care of it, the useful life on paint is only so long. The useful life on carpet is only so long. And, with, both through apartments and through a lot of the bigger players getting in the single family rental game now, you can't put a house that's not pretty online and expect to rent it for market rate. Market rate right now has gone up a lot, but so has the market quality of the product. So that is something to think about.
The expectation of the resident has gone up.
And you have to factor that into your 1 to 2%. If you have to paint and recarpet a house, and that may cost you $5,000 to $10,000 depending on the size of the house, then it's going to take you a very long time to hit 1% expense ratio.
Yeah, that's right.
So do you want to factor that into your decision on a predictive basis, or do you want to say, well, what am I doing with that cash in the short term? Do I have the cash in the short term? Do I want to take out a home equity loan? There's 1,000 different considerations.
Yeah, and then even if you did want to sell it, you might still have to do those things.
You might still have to do those things.
If you want to get top dollar.
So. Yeah, you may take a hit on the sale if you don't do those things. So there's a cost either way.
That's right.
But how that cost interacts with you and your goals is different in every situation.
Yeah, that's great. Yep, this has been perfect. Jacob, I appreciate it. Again, listen, if you are in the Detroit area and you're considering renting your house, you'd like a local expert, I would recommend you reach out to somebody on Jacob's team. You can reach us at sales@evernest.co, and someone will be right in touch with you. They'll set up a meeting. They'll talk to you on the phone. They'll answer any questions you have about Jacob's team and the services we offer there in Detroit. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we hope this video helped.